Wake up 2,000 years ago. You live in ancient Rome, a huge city with paved roads, shops, apartment buildings, fountains, public baths, and even a sophisticated sewage system. But there is one problem. You need to go to the toilet. And this is where things get interesting, because the ancient Romans actually had public toilets, but they looked nothing like the bathrooms we use today. In Rome, there were special public latrines where dozens of people could use the toilet at the same time. They were usually long stone or marble benches with holes in them, and there were usually no walls or private cubicles separating people. If you needed to go, you simply sat down next to everyone else. Yes, people could literally sit side by side while using the toilet. And surprisingly, this wasn't necessarily considered embarrassing. For Romans, the toilet could also be a social place. People talked, discussed news, business, politics, and everyday life. Imagine sitting next to a complete stranger and casually discussing the latest political scandal while both of you are using the toilet. For us, that would probably be extremely uncomfortable. For them, it could be completely normal. But there was a much more important question. Where did all the waste go? Many Roman public toilets were connected to channels underneath the seats. Flowing water could carry waste away into the city's drainage and sewage system. One of the most famous examples was the Cloaca Maxima, a massive sewer system in Rome that was originally built centuries before the Roman Empire. It helped drain water and waste from parts of the city. But don't imagine that ancient Rome was perfectly clean. It wasn't. Not every building was connected to the sewer system. People also used cesspits, containers, and other methods of waste disposal. And sometimes, waste was simply dumped into the streets or designated areas. Now comes one of the strangest questions. What did Romans use instead of toilet paper? Obviously, toilet paper didn't exist. In some public latrines, people may have used a special sponge attached to a stick. It is commonly called a tersorium. After use, it could be rinsed and reused. Some sources suggest that water or vinegar may have been used for cleaning. It sounds pretty unpleasant to us, and honestly, it probably was. However, historians still debate exactly how widespread this practice was and how these tools were actually used. So the famous image of Romans sharing one sponge should be treated with some caution. And what about the smell? Well, things could get very unpleasant. Imagine a hot city with thousands of people, animals, garbage, sewage, and no modern waste management. Even with sewers and running water, Rome could be a very smelly place. And yet, the Romans cared a lot about personal hygiene. Public baths were extremely important in Roman society. People went there to wash, exercise, relax, meet friends, and conduct business. So there was an interesting contradiction. The Romans had surprisingly advanced systems for water and sanitation, but their cities could still be dirty and smelly. And public toilets weren't the only option. Wealthy Romans could have toilets inside their homes. But life was much harder for people living in crowded apartment buildings. Imagine living on the 4th or 5th floor of a Roman apartment block. You need to use the toilet. Walking all the way downstairs every time isn't exactly convenient. So people could use chamber pots or other containers inside their homes. And then came another problem. What do you do with the waste? In some cases, people simply emptied containers outside. Roman authorities even introduced rules and laws to deal with waste being thrown into public spaces. So if you ever thought that people throwing things out of windows was a modern problem, it definitely isn't. But perhaps the most impressive thing about ancient Rome was that the Romans understood the importance of water and sanitation on a massive scale. They built aqueducts, public baths, fountains, drainage systems, and sewers. Some aqueducts carried fresh water for many kilometers into the city, and this water wasn't used only for drinking. It supplied fountains, baths, private homes, and sometimes helped flush sewage through drainage channels. For a city that existed 2,000 years ago, this was an extraordinary level of urban engineering. So what would happen if you suddenly traveled back in time and visited ancient Rome? You might see enormous public toilets with no private cubicles. You might see people casually talking while sitting next to each other. You might see channels carrying waste away beneath the seats. You might see chamber pots inside homes. You would probably visit a public bath, and you would definitely notice the smell. Ancient Rome was far more technologically advanced than we sometimes imagine. But there was one important invention the Romans never quite managed to give us: privacy in the bathroom. And after learning how ancient Romans went to the toilet, you might never look at your own bathroom the same way again.